So about 2 weeks ago, we got the first couple episodes of the new Invincible season. During those episodes, we got a flashback of Omniman's story on planet Viltrum right before the Scourge virus wiped out almost all Viltrumites. They started us off with Nolan's adult ritual in which he takes on both of his parents in a 2-on-1 fight in which Nolan proved himself among the elites of the Viltrumites. And at just 18 years old, he was able to hold his own against two very strong adult Viltrumites, which got me thinking, if Invincible and Omniman were to fight around the same ages in their life, who would actually win? Would Mark be strong enough to take on his grandparents if they had jumped him to prove himself as a Viltrumite warrior? Well, in this video, I'd like to try and provide an answer not only to that question, but we're also gonna uncover how far Mark has come by now, and whether or not he's now able to beat the Viltrumites we've seen on the show so far. So relax, grab your popcorns, and let's get straight into the video. Now, it's pretty obvious that Season 1 Invincible is insanely weak within the universe, and even compared to his own levels of power in the later seasons of the show. The first major knock to his strength is his overall lack of skill and experience. For most of the season, he's simply getting trained by Omniman to control and master the very basics of his power, and even by the end of the season, he still has massive amounts of room to grow and improve. And in his only fight against a Viltrumite, being Nolan, Mark obviously gets absolutely destroyed, only able to knock around Nolan in bursts of anger that ultimately do zero meaningful damage to him before getting beaten up immediately after. At this point, I don't even think Mark is the strongest hero on Earth. That honor would go to the Immortal. Even though he gets many fraud allegations, in his fight against Nolan, he was able to hold his own and actually land shots and damage Omniman. While it's true he still gets killed by Omniman, but it's just because Nolan was going for the kill shot, something he never really attempts to do against Mark because he's holding back and deep down doesn't want to kill his own son. The best we can say for Mark in this season is that he is leagues weaker than his father and very insignificant in comparison to him. So how would this version of Mark do if he fought against the younger version of his dad instead? Well, if you actually pay attention to the 2-on-1 fight, Nolan, at least in my opinion, is clearly barely weaker than his parents already, if not being straight up equal to both of them individually. At the beginning of the fight, he can exchange blows equally with the two of them, only starting to lose when they take advantage of the fact that it's a 2-on-1 fight. Young Nolan easily breaks his dad's chokehold and knocks away his mom with a single kick. He then straight up starts beating his dad and making him bleed. Despite then getting beaten down by a tag team combo, he managed then to beat his mom in another 1-on-1 exchange, even blinding her in one eye. So it's pretty clear that Season 1 Mark stands no chance against young Nolan, even though both of them are around the same age. Season 2, however, is where the conversation starts to flip. Because by Season 2, Mark has already surpassed the Immortal. Mark even says to the Immortal that he's stronger and faster than him, and the Immortal agrees completely. That means that all the stuff that Immortal could do to Omniman in Season 1, Mark is now capable of doing that as well. Mark's feats in this season completely back up the narrative that he's grown massively stronger. He even has his first few run-ins with Viltrumites, and these fights are really the key to the whole discussion because, unlike Season 1, we're no longer speculating about whether Mark is on that level. He is literally fighting Viltrumites now. Firstly, on Thraxa, Mark has a run-in with Lucan and honestly gets slammed almost immediately. But we also know that at this point, Mark is still holding back while fighting. And when Mark finally starts fighting with the actual intent, he easily overpowers Thula and after a back and forth fight, has her defeated until he hesitates. In the aftermath of this fight, Craig considers Mark's performance here equivalent to proving himself as a Viltrumite in a real battle, and worthy of replacing Nolan on Earth. That is a massive statement. Young Nolan can maybe beat a lower level Viltrumite in a 1-on-1, meanwhile Mark is actively fighting Viltrumites who are operating around current Omniman's general tier of strength. So to me it seems that Season 2 Mark has clearly surpassed young Nolan at this point in time. By Season 3 though, young Nolan honestly stops being the interesting comparison, because at this point, Mark is so far beyond that version of Nolan that the debate kind of loses its purpose. The actual question now becomes how Season 3 Mark compares to current Omniman, and in my opinion, this is where things genuinely get kind of insane. Because for that, we can obviously just look at the Conquest fight. While yes, Mark is weaker than Conquest, but he's able to tag him, fight him, and damage him, and ultimately outlast and overpower him in the end. And Conquest is not just another random Viltrumite soldier. He's one of the absolute monsters of the species. He's stronger than Lucan and definitely stronger than Thula. He's stronger than basically every normal Viltrumite we've seen in the story. And yet Mark is actually able to survive that, push through it, and win. Now yes, Mark needed help, and yes, Conquest underestimated him, and he nearly dies. But I don't really care about that, because none of that changed the fact that he still wins a fight against somebody who would be comfortably above the level of most Viltrumites, including, my opinion, Nolan himself. Now, one of the creators of the show and the people who worked on it specifically says that Nolan would find a way to win the fight against Conquest, but not necessarily because he's stronger. He just says that Nolan would find a way. So it's like him saying that yes, Conquest is stronger, but Nolan does win the fight because of plot. So at this point, this is where the Omni-Man comparison gets really interesting, because Nolan's whole thing has always been that he's the complete package. He's incredibly strong, incredibly experienced, highly disciplined, and just fundamentally more efficient than Mark in almost every fight they could have. By season 3, Mark is starting to brute force his way past that gap. His endurance gets ridiculous and his anger amps are terrifying. It would seem like the more damage he takes, the more dangerous he seems to become. Meanwhile, current Omni-Man honestly doesn't really have a feat in that show that feels like it reaches Conquest's level. He's clearly one of the strongest characters in the series, but the gap between him and Conquest is still there. Now, do I think that Mark can beat Nolan at this point in a one-on-one every single time? No. I still think Nolan would win against Mark simply because he's more intelligent and more experienced with the fights, especially when Mark tends to fight emotionally. But at the minimum, by season 3, Mark has become an extremely difficult fight for Nolan to win either way, and that alone tells you how insane Mark's growth has been. Which brings us to the bigger question this whole debate kind of opens up. If Mark has already gone from losing horribly to his father in season 1 to arguably surpassing him by season 3, then who can he actually beat right now? And honestly, quite a lot of people. At this point, I think Mark definitely beats Lucan. He definitely beats Thula. I think he beats young Nolan with absolutely zero issues. I think he has a chance against Iniza as well, although that one is a little more debatable. Thaddeus, on the other hand, is a weird one because he has the old man Viltrumite scaling, where you kind of have to assume he's extremely dangerous. But based strictly on what the show has given us, I don't think there's enough confidence to put him above Mark, at least not yet. Alan the Alien is also really interesting because Alan's growth is just as stupid as Mark's. And depending on where exactly you want to place him, that fight could honestly go either way. But even being in that conversation at all says a lot, because these are not low tier characters anymore. These are the people at the very top of the story. The only characters I think are clearly above Mark right now are the true monsters of the verse, characters like Conquest at his absolute best, Battle Beast, and Thrag. Those are the guys that basically exist in their own category. Oh, Mark is not number 1 yet. I don't think he's even top 3 yet. But that's not really the point. The point is that he's getting there way faster than anyone probably should, and that is the scary part. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what you think.